Hello.
Hello, Harper. How are you?
I'm good. I just need to take this out because I don't want to hear the sound of my own voice. Hold on. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm really good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. The little ones are asleep, so I'm free to have a little chat.
Beautiful.
And
Full
we've got a
disclosure,
lot to chat about.
we do have a lot to chat about. Full disclosure, I've got like a very needy dog next to me, so
I'm being the needy dog. So I just want to double check that we have everything running and that everyone can hear us and see us and things.
Yeah.
So there are comments that will come up on the screen, but it's a little bit delayed. So if anyone is watching and they're like, I asked a question, we will get to it. We just might not see you. But Chris, do you want to introduce to everyone what we're going to talk about?
So we are going to talk about the online harms bill, which will affect the way that people in the UK interact and with pornography in this country.
Online, actually, and offline as well. Yeah.
So Harper Countess Diamond is an expert in this, and I am not. So I thought I would be the one to come along and ask all the stupid questions so that you can fill me in, Harper.
I'll do my best. Look, and I need to kind of caveat this with I might not know the answer, and the answer that I do give might be from a very me perspective or a very sex work perspective. So people might be watching going, no, that's not correct. But it's correct as I know it, because I'm not an expert in this. This is just something that I've spent a lot of time learning. And I'm not an expert in policy law or sex work. I just have done my very best to educate myself on what is coming, and it might not be correct, especially if you're listening to this in a couple of months or even years' time. It's going to
Even
change
weeks.
quickly. Yeah.
So I think it's probably important to preface this discussion with the intention of the discussion as well, because we're not intending just to scare anyone. This isn't about kind of shocking people into anything, but I think we can both agree that it's about just like getting the information and kind of contextualizing the discussion around the online harms bill.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. So just before I start, I will be able to see just like questions that come up, won't I?
Yeah.
Beautiful. So I suppose firstly, the most important question to start with is, what is the Online Harms Act bill?
Yeah, it's an act. It's not a bill.
What is the Online Harms Act?
Well, so it's law basically, and it is a piece of legislation. So it's a piece of writing that the government put together. So I think it was Theresa May's government that was when it first kind of sprung up as an issue. But essentially, people are going, well, we should probably do something about all that stuff online. And then someone goes, yeah, we probably should. And then they agree that they're going to we should write something down. And then it goes into Parliament, and everybody across the two benches write down what they think is important for keeping, and initially it was for keeping children safe online. That's kind of the premise of it. So it was written down, and it was given to specific people to take charge of. So certain people over the course of this have been a lead on it or have had a very pivotal role in it. So it would be written as a guide, as a potential bill, as a draft, perhaps we should call it. And then once that's written, it was taken to the House of Lords. And the House of Lords is another building, and it's essentially lots of very experienced, very privileged, sometimes people, and very industry savvy and knowledgeable people, but perhaps not in sex work. I'm not sure if there is a sex work peer in the House of Lords. Anyway, so they had a look at the bill and they said, yeah, okay, we get what you're doing here. Maybe you need to adjust that. Maybe you need to adjust that. And various people had their say on it, and then they would send it back to the government. And this went back and forth for a couple of months to even, I think it was a year. And at different points, it's getting kind of different attention. At one point, there was a lot of news and hubbub around encryption being taken out and put in of various sub parts of WhatsApp and things like that. So there's been loads of different drafts of this. And then finally, once it went back to the House of Lords, who then finally gave it their seal of approval, it then became subject to what's called royal assent. So that meant that the king said, go for it. I doubt he's read all of it. He's probably just been consulted on it, but he has to trust his members of parliament that they are going to deliver things in the UK's interest. So that's kind of where we've been. So we've had all these people look at it, but the whole time of this bill going through parliament, as we'll call it, because it's going through to the House of Lords and back again, it's had lots of criticism about the freedom of expression. So how come I can't express myself in the way I want to online? And then someone would combat it and say, oh, we've had all these cases of this, and of course you can't speak about that online. So it's had so much, and it is written in really difficult language. And I know, I mean, I'm not the most savvy reader. I find it really difficult to concentrate. I found it really hard personally to kind of sift through all these words that I couldn't understand. So to like your average me, it is really complex. So I don't think it's been given the attention that it needs. But we are where we are now, and we can't change it. It's been written into law. And now it is with a government body. Well, I think they're independent of the government, but they are a public service, which is Ofcom. So they are funded by the government to deliver this law. So the Online Harms Bill has become the Online Harms Act 2023, and that's its official title. And the team at Ofcom are implementing that into really easy to understand, apparently, laws and measures and guidelines, so that anyone who this might affect can pick up the guidelines and go, okay, this affects my company or my business or whatever. I'm going to read it and understand how I can adhere to this new law. So that's it in a very big nutshell.
Yeah, that is quite a big nutshell.
Yeah.
So you mentioned about the curtailing of freedom of expression, etc. So can you just tell us a little bit more about like what it kind of what's the word? How it will affect like freedom of expression, what you can view, what you can make. It's like what is the effect of the?
So in layman's terms, it's creating spaces on the internet that are safe for children or vulnerable adults to view without coming to any harm. So that's without being influenced by very heavily misogynistic content or content that has very overtly religious or could lean towards terrorist organization. So anything that's a little bit difficult to explain to a child, that's the kind of things that we're aiming to keep out of that space. So it's a safer space for the internet for children, basically.
Okay, so that's the intention of the act.
Yeah.
Cool. So how does this kind of in reality then? What does this do to the internet or to people using the internet?
Well, I mean, if you're just Googling where to go, get like nice pajamas from, or where, what restaurants great near you, it's not going to affect what you see day to day, but it will affect what you do when it comes to viewing material that's a little bit on the fringes. And now I, as a sex worker, live in these fringes, and you, as the work you do, you also would probably Google, you know, what are the symptoms of this STI? And you need to know. So we don't actually know how it's going to manifest exactly when it comes to kind of medical content or access to information that that you might need if you want to know about an abusive relationship. Am I in an abusive relationship? Am I gay? How do I feel about this? So it's going to be very difficult to know how this is going to affect people until it's here. So when it comes to freedom of expression, we as adults, this is kind of like a rhetorical question, a question for the world. Do we as adults, when we walk out of our door, check that we are dressed in an appropriate way for the most vulnerable of society to understand us? I don't. I dress and go, yeah, I look all right. You know, and this is kind of asking us to do that with everything we view. So everything we see will go, ooh, should that be here? You know, everything that's posted should be moderated and checked. And when it comes to expression, young people need to see different types of expression in their environments so that they can understand what freedom is and what self-expression looks like. And that can be anything from sexual adventure to lifestyles to eating habits. It could be anything. But if it's deemed harmful, although it's good for you doing it, it's going to be hidden.
So let's kind of not be around the bush here. So it sounds like it's a way for the state to control what is like acceptable on the internet and move the responsibility like to internet users and websites.
I mean, yeah, if you want to say that, I'm having a personal battle actually with, is
Okay.
this a thing or not? I don't know. So when it first came through, I was like, oh, this is great. We do need to protect children online. There's way too much stuff out there. And then I kind of, the more I looked into it, I was like, oh, actually, maybe this is a bit heavy. And then as the bill has and just shifted and changed and then became the act, now I don't know where I sit. I feel like it's, yes, it is the state restricting what we view, but then there are things out there that you shouldn't see, that I don't want to see, you know?
So is part of the question where the who can determine what is
Yeah.
acceptable?
Where does
Who
morality lie? Where's the line of morality?
and who determines like what morality is objective as well?
Yeah.
Which, in the name of children, we've already seen with things like, you know, over the years through the 80s, early 90s, things like projects, Operation Spanner. That a lot of things can be done in the name of, will somebody think of the children?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
yeah.
it
And if we think about the Online Harms Act tends to cite that we are protecting women and children. I mean, women don't need protection from content on the internet. We have agency ourselves. We know what's right for us.
surprisingly real human people.
Yeah, it's funny that. Yeah, but they kind of keep saying it for women and children, and I get what they're saying. They're trying to say we're protecting women and children because we don't want men to see things on the internet and think that's normal. Well, we need to root down and go, this is education. This is how you treat someone with respect. This is how you understand what consent is and things like that. I think if people learn consent from porn, that's an issue, but it's not an issue with the porn. It's an issue with the education.
And the way that people learn and talk about consent as a society.
Yeah.
So kind of in further not beating around the bush, Arthur, because this is what I'm here for. The hardest hit and the kind of biggest effect will be around porn.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Be around porn.
So is that essentially all porn, or is it like extreme porn, or what is the conversation there?
Yeah, so the conversation and why am I qualified to talk about this? I'm not legally qualified, but I do represent quite a few workers, and I have tried to do my research, and I've spoken to government on a couple of occasions about it. So yes, essentially it's all pornography that's content created for sexualized consumption, but it's also things that are considered extremely sexual in nature without intention.
Okay, so like things about like my job in sexual health and HIV and LGBT activism.
Now, again, I don't know how harsh those restrictions and things are going to be when it comes to, you know, what does my penis look normal? Kind of like that kind of Google question. You know, what are we going to be seen? Because I mean, I remember growing up looking at books in the library with medical diagrams and things like that, and my mum and dad had like the anatomy of sex or something.
Oh, the
Which
classic.
my sister still has, which yeah, but I remember looking at that. So it's like you do see these things as a youngster. So who are we to go, oh no, you can't see that?
We did, but you can't.
Yeah.
Yeah. So would it stop people being able to view porn? Would it remove porn from the internet? Like, I'm kind of trying to ask stupid questions as well. Like,
ask stupid questions. Will it stop people from seeing porn? Well, the intention is yes, but also no. So the intention is that it's going to stop people who shouldn't be viewing it from viewing it. Will you still be able to see porn on the internet? Yes, you will, but you'll have to give a little to get a little in the future of this. And I don't mean in the short to medium term. I mean in the long term view of the internet. It looks as if society is moving towards a stricter, more draconian kind of clamp down on porn, but I think it's actually just clamp down on access to porn. Having said that, there are a lot of extreme porn acts that will be more stringently cut out, but also the main issue with it at the moment is that a piece of content that's hosted in the UK falls under UK law. A piece of content that's hosted in South Carolina falls under South Carolina law, but wherever it's viewed, it falls under the viewer's law as well.
So that makes the internet law around the internet very complex, right?
It does, yeah, it really does. So if I have something hosted on a server that's over there, I don't need to make sure that it's protected over there, but I need to make sure that anyone who's viewing from the UK, or if that service is provided intentionally towards the UK, that you can't view it. So the way of going around that is people will buy a VPN, a virtual private network, which means they can route their server and go, actually, I'm not in the UK, I'm in Uzbekistan and I'm viewing this piece of content in the back door. And I know that sounds really complex for people, but it's actually quite easy to do. And this is where the problem with the Online Harms Act lies, because once we implement this and we stop the general population from seeing the content that we've created, we also and unknowingly create a kind of second class citizen for access to information. So if you're a very well-educated 23-year-old and you know what a VPN is, you can access that. If you've got money to pay for the VPN service, you can access that. So you, because you have that access and that privilege, can then access content that informs and educates you in a way that your peers won't get. So it's only as safe as the ability to view it from other areas. And I'm sorry if I'm waffling on. The way that Kids Online Safety Act is developing in the US, they call it COSHA, COSA, or something like that. They're doing the same thing. So it's almost like all of these kind of built up nations are going, okay, we're going to protect everyone in our nation. But actually, it's still going to happen. We're still going to have people going from, you know, like Venezuela, and they're going to be watching content through the back door in America as well. So it's only as safe as you are unable to get it.
Okay, but in theory, it's designed to stop children, because children, in theory, don't have access, or shouldn't, in theory, know about this.
Yeah, they shouldn't, in theory.
Cool. So, as a sex worker activist, which you do so spectacularly. Sorry, that was my dog. Which you do amazingly. And as someone who like produces porn, let's say that, how is it going to affect people in the sex industry? Like, with what you've seen and been talking about, like what kind of effect on like actual people is it going to have beyond kind of people's ability to wank?
So if I perhaps go through the customer journey for my customers, I can tell you at what points they're going to be affected by what legislation. So how would someone find me? They'd find me on a social media site. Now, they would be considered a very large service provider in the Online Harms Act, and they have budgets for putting in due diligence, for putting in extra kind of measures and checks and things like that. So they've been given quite a lot of stringent rules to follow, and they're already starting to clamp down on this. So I shared some information with you that I managed to get hold of, which was straight from a Twitter moderator. And that gave an indication of some of the content that they are starting to flag now, which is crazy because it is just sexy things. It's not content that's necessarily designed for sexual entertainment. It's just things that are a little bit nude.
Maybe a person with breasts.
Yeah, I mean, art. Like, I don't know, Venus de Milo. She's pretty naked, right? I think. So I've totally lost my train of thought.
So we're going through the customer journey.
So where do they find me? They find me online. If I can't post content that's like a little bit saucy and a little bit sexy, it's going to be a little bit harder for me to get across that I do what I do. Now, we already as sex workers live under this kind of pressure. So I have a TikTok hashtag that's cooking with Countess, and it's nearly at 100 million views, which I just cannot understand. But that is sexy, funny content that's produced in a way that's like, oh, I'm so silly, I didn't know it was a vibrator. And I've kind of managed to skirt these kind of flagging and content removal guidelines by just being a bit dull about it and kind of not making a big fuss. But if you give it the eyes and you've got your latex on, your account is going to be banned. So we're kind of good at doing that already as sex workers, but it's gonna get harder. It's gonna get only harder to do those things, and it's going to be quicker to be removed as well. So they'll be implementing different types of content flagging, so depending on the size of the servers, size of the platforms, and depending on the type of platform they are, they'll have to adapt what their kind of like reporting structures are. But the most important thing is a speedy response. That's been prioritized in the harms bill. So it's not necessarily that it is removed forever, but it's that there is a very speedy response to it so that it can't spread. So right or wrong, that content will be taken down and then it will be assessed at a later date. That's kind of their priority. So they want to make things as easy to follow, but there's a lot for these big companies to do. Thankfully, they've got the budgets for it. Smaller companies who have not got, let's say, a one-to-one messaging system, they won't be at risk of much more litigation than they already are, because they're already doing some measures. But if they don't have, like I say, video sharing ability, one-to-one messages or encrypted parts, it's not going to be that bad. It's what's the word? Precaution. it varies upon the size of the company. So that's the first stage of the customer journey. How are they going to find me, right? And then once they do find me, they're going to go to my website. Now, in around 2014, there was the Video TV Act update, and essentially lots of sex workers had their accounts taken down with online, like, websites, just advertising services. And I'm not sure if that's going to happen in this case, but this is the bit that I do not understand. So my website, because there's restrictions around what I can post onto my website as is, I keep it quite sexy, but very minimal on detail. So it doesn't tell you exactly, oh, it's going to be a bit of that, and it's going to be a bit of that. It just gives it a bit of a suggestion as to what is happening in this world.
Yeah, and I've seen your website as well. It's very suggestive.
Yeah.
There's nothing, like, there's here up.
Yeah, it's kind of like there's no boobs. It's kind of nice.
No.
There's a couple of written things that are a little bit spicy, but I know that the Online Harms Act is going to affect audio as well as visual, but written porn as well. So does my website class as written porn? I wouldn't think so. But who
because they're like the reports, they're like battle reports you've got on your web. They're like reviews, and
yeah,
they're like subs writing about their experiences.
If this is sexy or not, I don't know. So I don't know what will happen at that stage. Then when somebody, let's say, joins a platform that I have, so to meet anyone in real time, I like to know someone a little bit first, and so I would invite them to come and talk to me on a paid for platform. It kind of, put a bit of money down, and a lot of people do that. Come and talk to me on my OnlyFans, on my Loyal Fans, whatever it is.
Because for context, you do dom content, but you also do like in-person domination.
Yeah. So before they get to in-person domination, they got to pass the vibe check, right? So they come and talk to me because that platform has an encrypted service, so a messaging service. Now, there's two options. It can either be encrypted with a backdoor entry, aka not encrypted at all, or it can just be a normal monitored chat. So either way, these two things now just become one. So there is no private way to talk on, let's say, like Facebook. I don't actually have Facebook, so I don't know if it's encrypted. Instagram, I don't know if it's encrypted. WhatsApp, I feel like the question around WhatsApp is still looming. Will it just pull its services from the UK? I don't know. So once we get into that platform, before they get to view that content, to go to that website, to talk to me, to engage in my customer journey, that user will need to put in their ID. And that in itself is a barrier. Now, my consumers, my clients, my wonderful fans, most of them wouldn't mind doing that because they're pretty open and they're pretty chill, and they use a lot of online services anyway. Like to get your bank verified, you have to upload your ID and things like that. They probably would be fine with it, but I would definitely lose a good, probably 40%, I would say, of the casual subscriber who's just sort of interested in a little look around. And 40% of that platform is a huge amount of my income.
Yeah, that is a lot.
Yeah. And
so then, if you'll just allow me to recap.
Hey.
And
then where do we go from there? We'd have conversations on there. That conversation would be monitored. I mean, it's monitored anyway for keywords, but perhaps it'd be a bit stricter. The website basically has to has to register as a video platform. And then I think the government are going to kind of look at each individual case and go, okay, yeah, you're this type of size platform and you provide this type of service. Therefore, you have to deliver X, Y, Z, kind of changes to your site. But there's Then once you go from that, well, there's not going to be any change to how I would book and see someone in real time. But my website does again host a form that people can submit information to. So they can say, I would like to come and see you in London, in Dubai, and I then take that information and it's processed by my assistant. So that is a really difficult part of the Online Harms Act, and it's section 52 and 53. And that is the solicitation of prostitution. Now, while I don't necessarily insert anything in my clients, it's not something I do, I still class myself as a sex worker, and I don't see that there's any disparity between like selling your feet pics online to being a dom or whatever. So I can see that I'm in that prostitute word. I'm in that. Now,
because that word can differ can be very vague in meaning, right?
Legally, it's still a word that is in use, despite it being I'd say it was a slur.
Kind of weird.
Yeah, it's a bit gross, isn't it? Yeah. So legally speaking, my website is pimping me out. So yeah, I could potentially be at harm of being prosecuted under the solicitation of prostitution.
So in theory, then would the host of your the people who say you use like a hosting service, are they then in theory legally pimping you? In theory, if they're based in the UK,
yeah,
and you're
they are also profiting off of prostitution as well.
So does it
inciting prostitution for gain?
Yeah. So then does profiting off of prostitution come into it as well?
It's not in the Act, no, because that's then becomes separate law.
Yeah.
But it's definitely referenced under section 52, 3 and 4, that there will be, essentially it's referenced, and I don't know how it's going to impact. So if we consider sites like Adult Work, for example,
which is the largest in the UK, the largest escort service in the UK, or website in the UK.
So Adult Work, I thought I was being disturbed. Adult Work at the moment, they have a very clever little tagline at the bottom of their website that basically says anything that two consenting adults get up to together is their own business. And that's how they kind of skirt this legality. I mean, it is illegal, isn't it? But there is some kind of, and I've tried to find out. I have a wonderful lawyer friend of mine, and I've said, look, give me the gossip. How the hell do they do it? Even he's not sure. But it is legal at the moment because you're not actually profiting from sex workers. You're merely enabling a process to happen, and now whether that's sexual or not, you don't know. But there are a few types of sites that do this. And yeah, I think there's going to be a lot stricter rules that come into play around this. But Adult Work itself, if you wanted to view it, let's say this time next year, if the legislation goes ahead as it is, as a client wanting to book a service provider, you would have to upload your ID and have it verified against your face.
Okay, so if I'm a client, I'm looking to hire you via Adult Work, I would need to put in my passport. So
yeah,
I don't know many people who would do, well, in theory people might do it.
Well, I think I'm actually for this, which is strange because I'm usually anti things. I don't know. But so basically in America there has become this kind of movement towards screening. Now, sex work in America is illegal. It's not unknown, it is fully illegal. So everybody is at risk in selling sex in America, seller and the buyer. So American, I would know the world of pro-domination in America. they require screening from clients, because America has access to things in the UK that the UK don't, which is data on that individual. So, for example, you could give me your ID and I could put your name, any other information I know about you, so your address, your license number, or your phone number, into one of the search systems that you pay for, and I could find out if you have any criminal convictions. So I could then make a decision whether I feel that you're a safe person to meet. So say, for example, you had an instance of fraud 6 years ago, innocent mistake, you could have been doing something dodgy, whatever, but it's probably not risk to me. So I'd be like, okay, and then I'd make a choice whether to see that client or not. But if you had sort of a sexual offence on there, then it would be pretty likely that you would say, no, you wouldn't be safe to come and see me. And this is a really common practice in America, but it's common practice for those, again, who can afford it, who are privileged enough to have access to the software, but also privileged enough to be able to say no to a client and say, actually, I'm all right for this time, thank you, that kind of thing.
Yeah, because I suppose, let's be real, not everyone in the sex industry is able to say no.
Yeah. I mean, it's a job you can pick up and put down, and a job that you may have to do around childcare and other jobs to make ends meet, and it can be a really precarious situation. So yeah, not everyone has the beauty of choice.
So sorry, my husband's just come in with a plate of nice looking food. So how would this affect kind of people in a more, like, workers in a more precarious situation then? Like, if people need to put in their ID to get onto adult work,
yeah,
where would other people, would they find somewhere else to go, or how would they find that kind of work otherwise, in theory?
Well, there are people in in America, and all we really have is the evidence from America. There are people who do it, but then there are people who don't. So I don't know. I think we would have to ask the general population, would you be happy to submit your ID to an adult website? The websites at the moment that do ask for ID before a client books, so there's one in Switzerland called Choice, which is coming to the UK, which I think is a good website. They already ask for ID, and they have lots of clients on there. There are people who do this already. There are systems that exist, but those who don't, you need to question, well, why? But they are using the safe systems that that government, ID verification use. I know the one in Switzerland, Choice, they use the same ID verification, like encrypted software, as the government use in Switzerland as well. Now, everything in Switzerland is secure, right? So you would expect great things from Switzerland, but yeah, it's a potential sticking point for sure.
Hello, are we back?
You're back. Yeah.
Hello. Sorry, that was on my end.
That's all right. I was just saying that the ID verification systems have come a long way in the last few years, and now are using much better systems than we were perhaps considering when the Video and TV Act came in, or was almost coming in 2014. But what would it mean for workers? I don't know. I think it would create a two-tier system. Those who can afford to be on the sites, and then those who can't afford to be picky.
Essentially having like a digital luxury economy.
Yeah. If you're the kind of escort or dominatrix or companion that earns really well through other means, perhaps you have another job and you're not questioning whether, am I going to eat if I decline this booking, then yeah, I think it's going to cause a two-tier.
So I'm going to ask a potentially controversial question now. So we talked about kind of like the potential effects on people in the sex industry, but what about, I'm gonna use these. What about the normal person, and why should they care about A, this, and B, people in the sex industry?
Why should they care about this? I mean, people have used the phrase the thin end of the wedge. I'm an eternal optimist. I don't think it's the thin end of the wedge. But then, I don't know. Being an eternal optimist, I'm often wrong. I'm often disappointed. Why should normal people care?
Or I suppose, let's rephrase that question. Like, what effect will it have on like the normal person? Is it putting in our, like, maybe having control over our access to things? I say art, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think you need to think more widely as a normal person, and you need to think, I am a person of the society in which I'm in, and do I want to be in a society that is restrictive, that is holding and withholding information that could be vital to someone's safety or well-being? Do I want to be part of a society that pushes things under the carpet for safety's sake, or do I want to be part of a society that is free to have difficult conversations and talk about difficult things and Google, am I being trafficked, or what is circumcision, or something like that? Because these are the innocent or not so innocent questions that people ask Google every day, and we are now going to see a curated answer come from those search queries. And I think that's important. Who
And,
determines what is right and wrong for those around you to see?
and I agree with you there, especially so as someone who, so I work, I work with people, particularly around their sexual health, just to like contextualize this. Work around people's like sexual health with HIV. I do work with people in the sex industry, but I work with people who are like marginalized or othered by services, and try to link them, and also like trying to. I work one-on-one with people in clinics and talk to people in a very intimate way. And I quite often spend my time answering those questions, those kind of questions that you talked about Googling, right? Like, am I gay? Am I being trafficked? What is, the amount of times I've taught, particularly men, what consent is. But also like people who are, I've had people who are suicidal because there's so many factors in their life, and actually all they want to do is be able to come.
Yeah.
Like I talk of not having a curated version of this kind of information does worry me, as sorry to kind of like center the discussion around me now. It worries me as like someone who gives people like very balanced answers that are catered towards them, and sees the questions that people are asking that kind of contributes to their, like, not only their sex life but their well-being as well.
Completely.
The idea of having something curated and someone else deciding what is acceptable, whether or not, just even the concept of someone deciding what is acceptable or not is, it worries me.
But then should we let 10-year-olds into the conversation? I don't know. I mean, there are things they need to know, but they need to be told in a manner that is appropriate for their age.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there are measures that need to be taken on both sides. There needs to be. I mean, I was having a conversation with one of my submissives the other day, and I said, how do you feel about porn? Do you feel that it's got too far? And he said, yeah. And I was quite surprised by that answer.
Mm-hmm.
And when he was watching he's into sissification and things like that. He said when he was watching sissification porn, when he was growing up, he would kind of see these boys kind of emasculated and made to look pretty. That was kind of it, really. And that was his fantasy, that he enjoyed that. But now it's become much, much darker, much harder, much, much stronger, much dirtier, and now, you know, these like very feminine boys are being kind of like pimped out for cock or whatever it may be, and he's like, it changed, it became more violent, and he said
Mhm.
that's not okay. It's like that somebody went, oh, I've got a fantasy, and someone went, no, I can do one better than that. Oh, I got that
Yeah.
oh, I can do one better than that. And I would agree. I mean, as a sex worker, I've had conversations with people, and I thought to myself, that's not appropriate, that's too far. But the way it's framed is so innocent, and then you sort of think, was I being sensitive to that? But no, that was a very nefarious point or question that they made. You know, like on Twitter, why is there still content on there depicting things of underage people? Even now, there's content on there, and we already have content moderation systems. So could we not make the content moderation systems that we already have just work like a little
Mhm.
better? You know, I've seen it sometimes. There'll be somebody will share a post, because we are very good at self-regulating, and the kind of the emotional, the consent awareness that particularly the sex industry has. We are aware of things, and we know what people are interested in, and sometimes you'll get a tweet sent round through like the kind of backsides of Twitter, Twitter DMs and on WhatsApp and things like that, and someone will be like, get this, report this Twitter account because it's pushing, you know, like indecent images. And hundreds of people will say, I've deleted it, I've commented, or I've reported it, or I've blocked that account. And yet, you know, like 24 hours later, you can still see it. And it's like, why isn't the system that is designed to keep people safe keeping people safe? It's clearly not working. And that's why we are now moving on to stricter measures.
Mhm.
But then it does make me think, well, is it just going to be one of the same? Is it not going to actually work again? I don't know.
And I suppose if speed is part of the response, like is the most important thing, then it's very likely going to be done by AI or AI led.
Yeah. Proportionality was the word I was thinking of before, but yes. And then in there we have another problem. So as a union, actually, we spoke to the Financial Conduct Authority quite recently, and we said, look, why are we as sex workers being flagged as having instances of fraud on our account? And essentially the FCA just kind of went, we don't know, we'll get back to you. But they suspect it's down to some kind of bias or automation in their AI that is causing a conflation with sex work and fraud.
Mhm.
Because why else, you know? Because of course we're sex workers, of course there's fraud, there's coercion, there's trafficking. You know, there are lots of people in the industry who are bloody unhappy, but you know what, I don't think I've ever seen a happy woman, I don't know, road sweep or binman. I don't know. There are many jobs in the world where people aren't empowered either.
Mhm. And I suppose as well, like, yes, if you could, what job would you want to do if you could do any job? None. Um, what would I do? I would do nothing.
Yeah.
I think as well, like if they're using AI, AI can be poisoned. Like AI, there's like issues around just like the sustainability of AI as well, and how
Yeah.
AI can function long term, especially if it's feeding into its own data.
Mm.
But that's not really part of this conversation. But we'll be aware that AI is a problem within this.
Yeah, I'm going to an event in Parliament on Wednesday next week, to meet with an MP to discuss deep fakes and kind of how it, or if it perpetuates harm. And I'm a bit torn on it, really. I don't know. I've only used AI for good, you know, to scan sites, to take my ripped content down and stuff like that. But if anyone has been the victim of deep fakes, that, you know, there's really bad and harmful consequences. So yeah, AI is a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, and I suppose as well, there's the ethics, like differing ethics in like using the same process for different outcomes. Like I suppose it's one thing, like using a deep fake to make Obama say like, I need pee 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 poo poo,
Yeah.
and another thing to have him like elbow deep in, I don't know, just about anything.
For you.
Should be so lucky. But yeah, so kind of like coming back to the Online Harms Act then. So we've talked about like what it is, what kind of like effects it might have on different groups of people as well. And that there's like potential kind of moral issues or like ethical issues around like who decides what is moral and what is extreme, etc. So I had a question, but I've just forgotten it, so just bear with me 1 second. So
for a bit.
Vamp.
Just vamp.
So I think what kind of services do you do? Like, is this stuff happening inevitable? Like, is ID verification the future of the internet?
In the short term, I think yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think systems to this is a very difficult question, but yes, I think short term AI will help in the short term. AI will then cause unintended consequences, and I'll probably be sat on YouTube or whatever it's called, the new YouTube when this one gets banned, talking about the new when it's not enough to have an ID, because let's be realistic, you can easily get a fake ID from AI. There was a study done recently, I think Free Speech Coalition shared it on their Twitter, the amount of users who had their profiles verified with an ID that was generated by artificial intelligence, with their face, with their name, but a different country or a different date of birth or whatever it may be. So yeah, I think it is the future. I think it's the medium term future, but I don't think it's going to be the solution for the next 50 years. No.
Mm-hmm. And then something I don't know if you have thoughts around this. And we haven't talked about, like, we are friends and we haven't talked about this in the past. So I'm sorry if I'm curveballing you. But it's what I'm here for, Harper. So yeah. So if kind of so websites as we know them are like centralized, right? They're on a server. There's someone that owns them. There's, you know, like it's from a place. So they're like have a focal point, and that is being centralized, right? And there's a movement now, just kind of taking a sidestep. There's a movement now towards like decentralized websites where, you know, where different bits of information and packets of information are stored in different parts of the world. And no, like maybe someone set it up, but maybe no one has particular ownership over it. And there might be ways in which like algorithmically they make themselves run, but otherwise like there's no like one person in charge of it.
Right.
So in terms of, is there something that firstly, is that something that you've thought about?
No.
Okay. Because something that brings a question, at least like within this discussion around like UK websites can't show titties, or you need your ID to see titties in Britain. It's something that comes along as like, well, what about if it's not like in a place? What if it's partly in Yemen and partly in somewhere else, and just packets of data floating around on a cloud? Like that then brings in a different question, right?
Like a Bitcoin encryption type of thing, like a
or like a website that's not just like, it's essentially stored in the cloud.
But you're still viewing it. It's in the country you're viewing it from.
Yeah, because it's what you're viewing it from that matters, isn't it?
That's why when you move to Venezuela with your VPN, you can view it. But I can offer a solution to potential harm. It's complex. It's not a fully formed idea. It's got holes, but it's an idea, and this is an idea that I presented at Sex Tech Berlin 2023, that if I could make one lasting impact on the industry, I would make a ethical trading and an ethical production selling standard. Like this is the absolute minimum that your content needs to have to be considered as ethical. So, you know, you hear like, oh, ethical porn, porn for women, ethical. Is it actually ethical? Were the people who starred in it paid fairly? Did they get breaks on the set? Did they have their concerns listened to before, during, and after? Do they have the right to withdraw their content? Do they have the right across the world to have that taken down? Because the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, which is something that exists, it's there, you can apply to have your content taken down. It falls on deaf ears if that country is not within the laws of the DMCA. It's just pointless you filling it out. In fact, it's risky to fill it out because you put your personal information on there and you say, hey, my name is Janet Jones and I am in that content. And then that your name has just been sent to that place that clearly doesn't follow rules and restrictions because they've nicked your content, and now they've got your name. So, so I would love to create an ethical benchmark. You know, like it's happened with fair trade chocolates. You now can get a fair trade chocolate. The issue with calling porn fair trade is that fair trade comes from a place of racial and ethical, like serious harms, whereas what we're talking about in the UK is perhaps like some sort of less harm. So we like to refer it as kind of fair work instead of fair trade.
It's an ethical standard of production.
Yeah, it's an ethical standard of production, but it's not like we're dealing with life and death situations on the daily because we're like crawling under cotton machines and stuff like that. It's just like an ideal trading like line in the sand. Like, here we go. This, if you can provide this. So if, say, for example, on OnlyFans, let's talk about OnlyFans. If you knew as a provider that the content that you uploaded, when it gets sold to whoever, that when that person opens that piece of content, they can't screenshot it, they can't download it, and that also it's encrypted with the same software, the same coding that sports broadcasting use. If we knew that that was a thing, and we knew that if that content, that piece of content was sent to Azerbaijan and broadcast, we knew that we could look at that content and see exactly where it came from, and that that person who did that is encrypted into that, and we can find out who they are and we can prosecute them. And now that would save a whole lot of stress. If you're thinking about harm to women, harm to people, if we can take that content that shouldn't be there off of the internet and have a right to be forgotten on the internet, I feel like that would be a game changer. But we can't do that without assigning who that OnlyFans platform belongs to. And then we bring in identification and, you know, self ID on platforms. I would say there is one company that already do this though, actually, and that's the choice website.
Yeah. So going back to kind of choice then, because I know you've had some conversations with them. I know you've kind of had you get around, my dear. You get around. You've had conversations with them. So like, without trying to be an advert for choice, because let's not be an advert. But like, what have they done in? Is it Brussels?
So I haven't actually had a conversation with Choice. They sent an email to the union, and I viewed that email and I thought, holy hell, this is incredible. And I had been given a little bit of sneaky information from a lawyer friend that they were trying to come to the UK. So I know a little bit. So I did my research, and basically I can't find a flaw in it.
Which is really rare in the sex industry.
Which is very unusual. So it's currently in Switzerland, and basically you can book a service provider through it. The person who, and this is ahead of its time. The kind of things that they are doing, they're doing before anyone else is doing it. So I'm not saying that this is the benchmark, but it's a bloody good benchmark as is, considering that everything else we have is so low. So they have a data pledge. I don't know what it is, but anyway, they use the same client onboarding systems when it comes to data verification as the Swiss government. Now that I trust Switzerland. They also embed the content with the same software encoding, I don't know what you call it, with that the sports broadcasters use as well, so they can find out where information has been leaked from. But the best thing about this website is, to get a bit, you got to give a bit. So you could go on it, I don't know what the website is, choice whatever, and you look at it and it's just blurred pictures, so you couldn't see if your auntie is a sex worker or not, because it's just blurred faces. If you're
you couldn't just like troll through for numbers to then call people.
No, you couldn't just find out who anyone is, which is on Adult Work. You can just create an account, verify your email or whatever it is, and then you're in, and you can click on the profile and you can see like whether your auntie's got her nipples pierced or something. You can see every single bit of detail, and it really puts sex workers in a more vulnerable position than they are already in. So yeah, you have to have your phone number verified, which I guess to some people is a bother, in which case they're not going to be interested in doing it. But it's not going to stop every single harm. I'm well aware of that, but it's different. The fact that you have to connect something that's not so easily changed and not so easily, phone numbers can be easily changed, but it seems safer. And then if you want to book someone, you have to upload ID. And
okay,
yeah, I'm a believer in it. I mean, America have already been doing it for years. But then, as we've discussed on here, it does create that two-tier system, and that's something that I'm very conscious of. I don't want to push the people who are potentially harmful towards sex workers. Is it going to create a sort of second industry where it's street-based, it's brothel work, because you don't need to provide ID? You can just say, hey, are you doing business tonight? And is it going to do that? Probably, yeah. So how do we combat the harm that disproportionately men, perpetuate onto women and people in the industry? How do we combat that? And how do we educate and help people have better conversations around sex in their own private lives, so they don't feel that they need to look elsewhere for validation, satisfaction, company? There's so much work we need to do as a society. This is just the tip of the iceberg, and I don't even think it's going to help all that much.
So just to kind of, what we're kind of saying is that there's good and bad points about the potential for good and bad with the Online Harms Act, and there's potential to stop harm and also cause harm with the Online Harms Act. But what I'm kind of reading from what you were saying is that the part of it's almost like putting a cork in a dam, where it's like a very simple small solution to like a tiny piece of the problem, when actually it's like a lot of there's like a big holistic
it's a societal issue. Yeah. I mean, perhaps we need to address why people have such a reliance on porn, or perhaps a reliance on extreme porn.
The extremification of porn as well.
What,
for better or worse?
It's what?
Like with the extremification of porn, it's better for better or worse. Like
it's great because people can say, oh wow, I like that, and I'm not weird for liking that, and that's how you do it safely. But then it's also like, oh wow, look at that, and and do a harm to yourself or someone else. Yeah, so there's
Mhm.
good and bad to it. There's so much nuance, there's so much to understand, but I feel like the government as is have only just caught on to the fact that people who work in the industry, sex workers, porn workers, content creators, are the ones really with the nose to the grindstone, experiencing all the horrors and beauties of the industry. They've only just realized that we aren't associated with the platforms that we work on. I attended a round table with Baroness Burton a couple of days ago, and I was the only representative of sex workers who was also a sex worker. So talking from pure lived experience on behalf of those who have also lived it. I think there was only me and perhaps 2-3 other people who represented sex workers in that room. The majority of people were platforms. And the cruelest twist of fate with this is that I was only invited out of panic because someone else realized that someone else was invited and someone else decided that that was a good decision. And I had to appear in some content that I didn't even want to appear in, to justify the fact that I needed to have my feet under that table. And that just goes to show the power of the man, the producer. You know, you have a big Googleable name. It doesn't mean you speak for the people whose content you appear in. And it was only by fluke, really, that I managed to find out that was happening. And people would, I had so many emails. I had like emails like, Harper, I think the UK government are trying to get in touch with you. I was like, what? Yeah, it was so funny. Like 4 different emails and a WhatsApp of all these people are like, I think this is the person you need. But the government didn't reach out to Sex Workers Union at all.
No, and it is a union with a union structure and paid crews, and it's a union proper.
Oh, it's proper. I mean, people don't recognise us. It's there was a thing recently in Scotland, and one of the members up there in Scotland of an opposing party, I'm not really sure the details, but they apparently was spreading a rumor that the Sex Workers Union isn't even a trade union. It's like, oh God.
Yeah.
But we are. Get over it. Sorry, you're a prude.
So what are you doing? So because like we talk, we know each other in life. We were talking earlier about with like approaching platforms and like trying to influence platforms in terms of just like trying to make them, because no, I think the conversation we had was that like where it was going was that like platforms are businesses, fine. They're profiting off of us, you, me, whoever else in the sex industry. That's never going to change, because also that's how it could possibly change, but that's a large way of how we make our money as people who make porn, do escorting, whatever. So yeah, I'm aware that, because I'm also in the union and I see all the union stuff. I'm aware that you have been talking about and trying to get evidence, or like trying to find like a minimum ethical standard for platforms.
Yes. So this is something that we haven't actually agreed on as a union. So that's something. It's not really.
Or something that you would like to push for.
Yeah, exactly. It's something that I feel really passionately about, because I think if we aren't making platforms and producers and governments aware of what good practice can be, they won't do it. If we shout loud enough, they might listen. But if we actively disappear from their sites, they certainly will stand up and listen. And I think it was I think it was 2021. I just given birth to my daughter, and I had 30 days to find a new platform when AVN Stars closed, and I was in a really precarious emotional place. But imagine if there was a minimum agreement between creators and platform owners that they had to provide 60 days notice or 90 days notice for you to be your contract to be, I say contract, but for your presence on that platform to be terminated. There's just something missing with the way that platform owners operate their businesses. As a
Because people
union,
get even less notice as well, right? People's accounts just disappear.
Instantaneous, gone. And that could be your primary platform. It could be a platform that you barely earn anything from. You know, and yes, you could probably say, well, that person was probably doing something wrong. But if they were doing something wrong, then they were doing it with full knowledge they were doing it wrong, because otherwise you didn't tell them. You know, they didn't know. Or if you did tell them, then fair enough, you need to delete their account because they continued to do the thing you said was wrong. But in the majority of cases I'm aware of, nobody knows what the terms of service they broke were in the first place. So how can you adhere to something that you don't even know? There are no rules, and therefore there is no comeuppance if a platform breaks those rules.
And so, correct me if I'm wrong, but this conversation, and it's less about setting a gold standard. Well, it's accepting and, you know, setting something to aim for in terms of a gold standard, but also like setting a basic minimum of like decency towards the people that you're profiting from, and setting like a basic level of like, this is what's acceptable. Like it should be here, but like here, you know, you're currently here, but here is the minimum that we as a union accept.
So say for example, there'd be a minimum percentage or a maximum percentage of commission that a platform could take, because Adult Work recently have upped their facility fee from 5% to 7.5%.
Yeah,
which is nothing in the grand scheme of things. It's a couple of percentage, but to the average person on there earning money, it's their income that's just been cut. So they've got to work harder to earn the same amount. Right, okay. And how much notice do you think a platform like that had given or should give? Because they gave no notice. In fact, they gave retroactive notice. They said, oh, by the way, we have made a change to your income. And it's just not good enough. It's not good enough.
So where would you like, how it's like, while we're chatting, while I've got your attention, a great one, like what do you actually want out of that? Like what would you like people to engage with in terms of deciding?
Well, it's not what I want, it's what the union wants. It's what the majority wants that's important. I could want all sorts. I could want,
and you do want
I want a lot. I could lay me a golden egg every Friday afternoon, but it's not about me. It's about what the union as a collective wants, because we are stronger together. So something I have been working on in the spare time between actually having a job as a dominatrix. Like I wonder at points if I work more for the union than I do for my actual self. But I have been working on a questionnaire for people to fill in, people in the union. So like, what are your basic needs? Like, let's set out a minimum guideline. What is an absolute must-have? So things that I'm considering putting on this to put to the union members for them to then give their response, and then we can collectively say, here's what we want, are things like a minimum response time. So my profile is under review because I've done something wrong. I should get a response within minimum 24 hours. And if you're not sorry?
Maximum 24 hours, let's clarify.
Yeah, minimum. I don't want to hear that. Maximum 24 hours. So if your profile or your ability to earn money has been limited, they need to give you as quick a response as possible, so you can get back on your feet, make alternative arrangements, whatever it may be. But that's the minimum, right? And that's the minimum that we have if you have, say, an employment contract, right? Now, I know that this is not an employment status situation. We are not employed by those platforms, but there should be at least a kind of a gentleman's agreement that there's a 3-day notice if there's going to be planned maintenance on a website or something like that, so that you know in advance that
Yes,
site
I
is.
see all the time people being like, "Is that upload down? Is that upload down?"
Yeah. Just a minimum, like just set a baseline to if you fall below that, you're failing the people who earn you your money. And I'm probably not gonna make any friends in the industry about, over this, but if the union can come together and say, what does good look like? Like, what does loyal fans do really well at? And what does OnlyFans exceed at? And what does Pornhub excel at? What are these things that we like? And let's either build our own cooperative and make it ourselves, which would be amazing, but
It's not an industry of people with capacity as well. So
exactly, we're already at capacity. We're already working with kind of like all sorts of different issues and problems and constraints and banking closures and stuff like that. So we ain't got time, babes. But if someone wants to build a platform and hand it over, we'll certainly take it. But what are those minimums, and how can we influence other platforms to take on those minimums? So the technology already exists. It's not about creating new technology or pulling out of somewhere technology that doesn't exist or can't exist at the moment. It's about using like the sports technology to encrypt content so it doesn't get taken and perpetuated and repeated across the internet in an alarming rate that then costs money to remove. Like, why can't we do that already? If one platform does it and it's causing great feedback, then why can't another platform do that too? Because they don't currently care, because we're not shouting loud enough. But that's what I would like to do personally during my time at the union, is to help establish a kind of like minimum agreement between platforms and the people that they earn from. But as I say, it's a collective thing.
Absolutely. So kind of like going back towards like the Online Harms Act. So is there, because you strike me as someone who like has a certain amount of like finger on the pulse. You're kind of like, we've kind of established that it's relatively inevitable that this kind of stuff is going to happen in whatever way it does. It's inevitable that it's going to happen. How it happens is uncertain.
Yeah.
But uncertainty is kind of, well, uncertainty is uncertain. But like, is there anything in your opinion or experience, just something I'm like, I produce porn, I do full service work, I'm in the union, I'm talking about this now makes me think about how can we're at a point now where there's like a year, coming up to a year kind of left of the Wild West internet.
Yes.
Like what can, I've already asked you this question anyway, kind of, but like what is there things that I can start doing now in terms of like, as a sex worker, as hot fucking bear porn, to like transition, or like, how is there things that I can start looking at or thinking about?
So everybody who creates content and puts it online needs to have the ID of the person who appears in the films. Even if not on file, they need to have a ability to get that information, and they need to have signed a model release agreement. So if you don't have those things already, those restrictions are only going to become tighter. So at the moment, you can't upload content to OnlyFans that hasn't got a verified performer in it. Now that legislation, whatever you want to call it, law, I don't know, that method is only going to become stricter. So they have to be a verified content creator, and they have to include one social media profile or something like that. So it's not just being that, it's that, and then it's going to be that. But at the moment, loyal fans, you only need to have that information on file. So I can imagine, in fact, I don't know if I should say this because I don't want to worry anyone, but it's also important. When MasterCard and Visa were changing their legislation, were changing their rules, I was worried about AVN stars not being compliant with the coming changes. And in my guts, I knew something wasn't right. And I reached out to their support service and I said, hey, just, wondering, like trying to get ahead of the curve. What's happening with this new MasterCard rules? Are you going to implement something? And they said, we're working on it. We'll let you know. And they didn't. And it just shut down with no notice. So they lied. They lied to me and they told me, where you work is fine. We're working on something. We got you covered, babe. Like, you're all right. Carry on earning for us. Carry on working. Carry on investing your time and your submissive's time in this platform. You're good. And then a couple of months later, they closed. My guts, my instinct is telling me the same thing about loyal fans. They haven't responded to a question that I've posed to the director, and there's 3 directors, and I've got his phone number, one of them, and I sent him a message and I said, hey, I'm concerned about this. And he said, I'll speak to so-and-so. And I said, I've already spoken to so-and-so. They didn't respond. And he was like, oh, I'll get someone else to call you, or I'll get him to call you. They never did. And I'm getting those feelings because they're not putting in place the measures that UK and European workers are going to have to meet. So it does make me question. It does make me wonder. It does make me worry. What should you do in replacement of that? I think every person who is currently earning a portion or whatever of their income online needs to diversify, but not diversify enough that dilutes your brand. Just have a backup in the just churning away, that every few days you post on or check in, just replicate the same content and put it over there if you can remember. So have a backup running. Always have a backup plan. Always have some money in your bank if you can. Always have a bank of content in case stuff does go down. So every time you do a filming day, put one in the bank. Or every second filming day you do, put one in the bank and go, right, I'll save that for when I need it, like emergency content. Like if you get ill or if your site goes down or whatever it may be. And I think it would be wise, if you're a full service worker, to move to a platform that requires ID, because while there might be this section 54 of inciting prostitution for gain, I think that is going to be mitigated if that platform can say, look, we vet everyone that comes on here. So yeah, okay, we're doing this thing that is morally, legally dubious, but look at what we are doing to make sure that the people who work on here are safe. And then I think that they're going to kind of sort of slither through the regulations and go, we're doing the absolute utmost that we can do in terms of our legal requirement. So will you turn a blind eye to the fact that we also let that happen? And I think that will be the case. I think there are companies that are preparing through no choice, because this legislation is coming through. I think there are companies that are preparing to close in the UK. And I'm wondering, no one has invested in adult work for a very long time. Is this their out?
And sorry, my dog is being very distracting. So new companies, I assume, would also. So is part what I'm kind of getting from you is like start having higher standards around paperwork and around protecting yourself and the other people in your content. Invest your time in other kind of multiple places, multiple platforms.
Spread yourself across, but also try and find platforms that are not necessarily sexy. So like there's Discord, Telegram, Slack, places that you can have communication with your fans, your submissives, your clients, without necessarily giving it away. You could, like, I've got what's it called, Team Diamond. Like, we don't necessarily talk about anything sexy on there, but there's an undertone, there's a current of, there's the inner circle, there's the free tasks chat, like there's the ability to have an interaction with me. It's not paid for and it's not sexy, but I know I can communicate with everyone. This is where I am. Should any platform of mine go down, I've got an other space. And that I have for, for everything. I've got I've got someone who manages my Instagram. They run 2 separate accounts under separate names, with their own content and their own kind of vibe and their own thing. And they talk to my followers. And if anything ever happened to my platform, I know that they could directly communicate with my followers and say, oh, this is her new thing. But yeah, we just got to be extra careful.
Yeah, so there's a lot of food for thought there. Just resilience, build resilience.
Well, I think sex workers are the most resilient people you're ever going to find. But I think build business resilience, because we do run a business after all. Like, try and look at yourself as a professional business entity and go, right, okay, so I need a backup plan, right? Team in my head, how am I going to do this? What am I need a day where I'm going to make sure that I've got all my paperwork in the right place. I'm going to set up an account on an alternative thing just in case. And you only have to do it once, set it up just in case. And then as soon as one goes down, you're all ready to go. No bother. This is where I am now. And there shouldn't be much. I say much. There shouldn't be much interruption in your income.
Okay. So I think to close that, so we've talked about what the Online Harms Act is, how it's coming into, like, what the process is of it coming in. We've talked about the time frame. We've talked about how it will affect people in the sex industry, but also people in regular people, normal people. We've talked about how we've kind of gone on some glorious side steps because that's who we are.
Love a segue.
Because why not? And we've kind of talked about how people in the sex industry can prepare themselves for any potential disruption because of this coming in and what it coming in might mean. Hopefully no one's scared, because it is just a thing that is going to happen. But yeah, so I think it's been an hour and a half now, and I have ADHD, and I am tired, and I can't concentrate for this long.
Yeah, we did well.
But I just then, is there anything that you want to say just to close this conversation?
Yes, there are 2 types of people that I want to talk to. I want to talk to workers, and I want to say to join the Sex Work Union, SW Union, SWU, whatever you want to call it, SW_union on Twitter. I think, look, if you're not sure where they are, come and find my profile, and I'm always talking about them. Come and join. It's a couple of quid a month. It's a really empowering place to be. And then I also want to say to the people who are viewing, who are not necessarily sex workers themselves, but perhaps enjoy the services of sex workers, please will you encourage the sex workers that you speak to, that you book, that you enjoy talking with, to also join, because they may just not know about us yet. They are only as enlightened as the world around them, and they may not know about it. So that's all I have to say.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for your time.
It's all right.
It's been lovely hanging out in a kind of digital way.
Nice, yeah. Is there anything that you want to say to the world?
I think we do have to accept that. I have lots of opinions. So I'm gonna just give me a second. So I think I would like people to I'm going to kind of go back on the. I I think it's very important. Like, so I, as a person in the sex industry, two people in the sex industry, and also like as a quite hard leftist, two other quite hard leftists who are also in the sex industry, I think that I would like to urge people to move away from this. I like, yes, capitalism bad. We get this, but I really like the idea of setting like acceptable minimum standards for people who are profiting off of us. And I would really like to see kind of more movement towards the establishing what those are and the demanding acceptable minimum, like moving away from like the gold standard and setting an acceptable minimum. I think that that's something that has a lot of potential for good within capitalism.
It's the easiest thing to fix, I suppose, isn't it? Like,
well, also like we know that capitalism is bad. We know that the idea of capitalism, like the way that businesses function, are structurally evil. We know that, the idea of a business is to make money, and therefore, if you can cut standards, you make more money. So, like, no business, no matter how good they are, is gonna do this like gold thing unless it's PR. But every business is gonna like bring the standard down. So, like,
washing, is that what it's called? Greenwashing? I don't know.
It was like washing, like greenwashing, gold washing, whatever, whitewashing, blackwashing. But I think I really believe in the power of just like setting that minimum standard as high as we can, but establishing what that is as people who aren't often listened to, who now have the power to start to demand things.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Especially of OnlyFans.
Yeah, or adult work, or just for fans.
Yeah.
Sleepy Boy, like I'm doing person work through Sleepy Boy, and it can be terrible sometimes.
Yeah.
My thing is pushing people towards an accepting of a minimum, and also just like working with businesses. Like that's how we make money.
That's important. Like
yes, capitalism bad, but also like that's how we're making money. So I need that to pay my rent and marry my husband and buy food and things. So, we got to exist within capitalism, and we can improve that.
Yeah, it's where we exist. Let's try and make it as best we can while we're in this. Yeah, it's been a real pleasure talking to you today. We should do this again.
We really should. Nice to speak to you.
Yeah. All right. Well, goodbye, everyone. Hope I haven't offended anyone. Bye.
Good night.